We can't hear anybody if you guys are talking to us.
Here we go. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started now. Katerina, why don't you call the roll and let's make sure we have a quorum.
Chair Daniel Gibbons.
Here.
Vice Chair Anna Barbieri. Cindy Sharkey. Right here. Eric Barney. Here. Greg Joseph. Keith Dustin.
Present.
Bruce Stringer.
Still very soft, but I'm here.
Patrick Schaefer.
Here.
Phil Markham. Excused. Robert Pignon.
Here.
Scott Bracken. Excused. Sherry Orn. Here. Tessa Stitzer.
Here.
Tom Siren. Excused.
Okay, so we've got a quorum. We'll move to the agenda. Item 1, the consent items. We have minutes for the February 27th, 2023 board meeting. Any comments, corrections, changes on those minutes, board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the consent item.
Move to approve the minutes of February 27th, Cindy Sharkey.
We have a motion, have a second?
I'll second, Greg Sheldon.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any? All right, minutes are approved. We'll move on to item 2, meeting for open comments. Do we have any indication of any comments that have been submitted, Katerina?
No public comments were submitted.
All right, anyone present who wishes to make a public comment? There being none, we'll close the public comment period, move on to the business items. Item 3.1, we are a little bit delinquent in recognizing 2 of our drivers, Ryan Jones and Chuck Orencole. Both of them were the NWRA Drivers of the Year, Ryan for 2021 and Chuck for 2022. Do we have, Pam, would you like to make any comments about these drivers?
Yes, so each of those drivers, Ryan's been with us for about 15 years, and when he gets to that mark, he'll be 15 years of accident, incident-free. Chuck's been with us for about, I believe, about the same, and he also has years of being safe out there on the road. For the NWRA Driver of the Year criteria, it's based on safety, years of service, and just so you know, we're in the small government organization sector for this particular category of the awards. And we've had many winners over the years and then runner-up going forward. But Ryan was instrumental in 2021 in achieving the award, and then as well in 2022. Because of COVID, there was a delay on them attending the Waste Expo. So in 22, they went to the Waste Expo and were presented their award, and the National Association also gives them an award of $1,000, which is really nice, and they are very appreciative. Ryan is on vacation today, or he would be here. I have faith in that, even though he's quite shy. And Chuck was going to be here. He texted me this morning and apologized, but he wanted to be out there on the road because of the squall on Friday. We fell behind in some areas, and then also today is going to be a challenge out to the Magnan area. So 2 very dedicated souls, thankful that they're on our team.
Great, thank you, Pam. So we have in the packet, board members, we have 2 resolutions, a resolution 4420 and 4421. I won't read the resolutions, but I'll entertain a motion on those 2 resolutions.
I'll move to approve resolution 4420 and 4421 on behalf of our great drivers. Congratulations to them.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Seconded.
Barney.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? All right, those two, resolutions are adopted, and I'm certain, Pam, that you'll get, copies of those. I've already signed the resolutions. We'll get those in their hands, so they can frame them, put them in their living rooms.
Right?
I'm sure.
Exactly.
That's
The copy of their check.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to item 3.2, continued discussion on the seasonal container reservation program. I'd like to thank Pam again for packaging this in our materials. Just a comment before we discuss this. Again, the purpose of this discussion is to narrow down any changes we would like to make to the scrap program for 2024. 2023, we've already decided that that's going to be status quo, the program as outlined. So there's not a big rush to make a decision, but I think the purpose for this discussion, and I'm actually glad to see it at the beginning of the agenda before we're all sort of glazed over, is to take the temperature of the members of the board as to what their preferences are. I will just comment that based on our previous discussions, we have six scenarios that Pam has put together in this package, which I'd like to just open up in a minute to discussion. We have two of those scenarios, scenario 4 and scenario 6, that have seemed, to this point anyway, to have generated not a lot of enthusiasm. They're not eliminated, but I think those are possible candidates for elimination from our discussion, although we really want to see what the board says. We have at least two scenarios, scenario 2 and scenario 3, that seem to be fairly popular. And I think also the staff in particular, Pam has expressed that the staff doesn't want to drive this discussion, and our decision shouldn't be based upon what the staff wants. But in my mind, that's a big consideration, because they're the ones that are going to have to fill this out. And Pam has indicated that scenario 2 is a really good choice for the staff. So with that, let me just open this up, and I think it would be wonderful if we could hear from multiple board members as to what their preference is and the pros and cons, and perhaps we eliminate a scenario or two today, perhaps we don't, and then we will simply continue this discussion in other board meetings. Pam, any other preliminary comments on this discussion?
I don't at this time, Mr. Chair. I do wanted to say Sione Twani is he's online with us today. He's on vacation, and wanted to make sure he was here to answer any questions that you may have, and just to hear the discussion.
Okay. I hope you're somewhere warm, Sione. It is not warm here. So, all right. With that, let me just open it up for discussion from the board members. If you want to identify yourselves by name, so that Katerina can make sure we get the minutes correct. But I'll just open it up now for discussion from the board.
This is Eric Barney. So my preference is, and I apologize I didn't get these submitted earlier. My preference would be 2, 5, and 1 in that order, or a combination of those. I like the idea of opening up the calendar to district-wide, because there's clearly, if you look at the reservations over the year, there's clearly a disparity between some communities and others, where one community tends to utilize this service at a lot higher rate than others. And so we may be, if we keep it by area, then we may be limiting the access to a service that we're covering anyway, simply because one area just doesn't use it that much. As far as option 5 goes, I do like the idea of adding more weeks. I think that if the demand is there, we should. And then as far as option one goes, the only thing I'm hesitant about on option one is the idea of a central pickup location and the burden that places on staff as far as my experience has been those central drop-offs become quite cluttered and messy, and there's a lot of cleanup work that goes there. It's not just an easy go in and pick up the container. It's usually there's a lot of sorting, picking up, maybe having to get another container over there because it's over full or spilling over. But those are my preferences. Last comment I want to make is limit repeat reservations. I don't know, like if we're doing reservations by community, I think that makes sense because we saw some communities where there was always a demand that wasn't being met. But if we're opening it up district-wide, I'm not sure that number 3 is warranted or justified until we can demonstrate that the reservations are being gobbled up and being exhausted. Just my thoughts.
Great, thank you. Other board members?
Mr. Chair, Cindy Sharkey from Sandy. You know, as long as we do have time to think about this and to throw a wrench in the works as we do that, I was thinking about this a lot over the weekend, especially because of the hurdles we have in Sandy right now on bulk waste collection, where we do it ourselves, right? And the same guys that are doing bulk waste collection right now are also plowing snow. So I don't know how we're doing it. I have no idea how. But I was trying to think of the efficiencies of how you accommodate and how you make the transition from the level of service we used to offer to something today, which in dumpster, I'm thinking about the whole idea of bulk waste. Bulky waste was what it was called, right? The whole idea was, how do we pick up stuff that you can't fit in a trash can? It's just something a little too big to fit in a trash can. So you had each homeowner that was going to have something, a refrigerator, a couch, something. Maybe even do some yard cleanup. But it was geared for an individual property owner to just take away some stuff that couldn't fit in their trash can. Now it's become dumpster reservations, which invites, of course, homeowners to do projects. They're hiring contractors to do work and put it in the dumpster. It's like it's almost like we've inadvertently invited something other than what it used to be. And you know, in Sandy, we addressed that by limiting the pile size. You can only have a pile this big, that's it. If it's bigger than that, we won't pick it up. Still not accomplishing what we wanted, but used to be such a nice, convenient service. Now it seems like it's something else. I don't know how to fix that, but I'm just curious. I know Salt Lake City and Midvale do call to haul. Have we ever considered that? Is that way outside of the scope of something we could ever do? It does seem to me, I haven't looked into it, we didn't consider it in Sandy. If we had been unable to keep the curbside collection program we had now, and that was hard for us to do that. We had to hire a bunch of attorneys to fight the DEQ to keep our program that we've got. But it might have been something we would have looked into as a plan B. Is that even more labor intensive, and so is that out of the realm of anything we could even begin to consider?
Good question. So the call to haul that the city does, Salt Lake City and then Midvale, and I believe West Valley does something similar as well. That does require manual labor to actually pick up the waste off of the curb and load it into the rear loader. So it would require a driver and 1 or 2 people, depending on the size. Like in Sandy or Salt Lake City, they actually use machinery to, move that waste off the street and put it into a loader or, a dump truck. So, yes, and then of course, like you talked about, could there be concerns about storm drains? And so the containers, I think, are effective to keep our storm drains clean because the waste isn't on the street or in the curb. It's not going to get washed away. I agree that, the container on the street, it allows people to share. So if somebody had one couch and a neighbor had more of a project going on, they could still fit their couch in if it was on the street. So the idea was to, you know, have it in the driveway, but yet try to have neighbors share. Certainly understand that that's not gonna work in every community, certainly understand that. So it's a good point, and, yeah, it would be a little more labor intensive, to answer the question. I
And
hope I answered the
so
question.
not something you really even want to consider or entertain. It's just not something Wasatch Front Waste could really accommodate without, I mean, if it's more labor intensive than the dumpsters in the street that we used to do, then, and that's our problem, we have to pull back on the labor rather than increase it, then that's the answer to the question.
Now, there are some times where, Gioni has worked with homeowners that they don't have room in the driveway, or they do wanna share it, but they can't have, for whatever logistic reason, and he has put a container in front of their home, but understanding that it's like an off the main road type situation, that's not gonna get drive-by landscapers and construction people that will just do the dump. So it's tricky, it's really tricky.
Okay, great comment and
Yeah.
discussion. Other comments, yes?
Yeah, I've got one. This is Greg Shelton. I know that previously we had discussed, as far as sharing dumpster, the contract that an individual signs. If we looked at updating that so that it's not so much holding the individual household responsible for what a neighbor might put into their dumpster. Because that, I know for a lot of people, that probably would, make them a little more hesitant to tell their neighbors, like, hey, come on, there's room in this dumpster, come throw some stuff in there.
We, just so you know, the agreement that we have in place, and certainly if you give directions to change something like that, we can do it. We modeled our agreement after, West Jordan's agreement. Murray modeled theirs after ours to basically try to get some ownership, and some sort of policing of what goes in that container. As you can imagine, being out on the street, we got all kinds of stuff, including ammunition and other things. So, yeah, it can get tricky, but I certainly understand. And we have had some pushback, and maybe Gioni can speak to this as far as, you know, how much pushback are we getting, Gioni, from homeowners as far as that agreement? And have you seen any kind of improvement?
Not a whole lot. Sometimes we still try to work with the homeowner. Sometimes if the container is overloaded and there's really nothing they can do, then we'll work with them on just picking up whatever they have. So, as far as pushback for that particular part, there's not really a lot. The homeowners are really good about taking care of what goes into their container. So.
Let me go back, Cindy, let me go back to you. Aside from this sort of call-to-haul possible scenario, which of the scenarios that Pam's put out do you prefer, if any?
Simply based on the limitations, I guess I would just say extend the season. And that's all I can think of. I think we're going into this with super good intentions of trying to get customer satisfaction back to a place where it was. And I think I'm having trouble accepting that we just won't ever. So I'm still trying to come up.
So you're thinking scenario 2, basically.
I think it is 5, yeah.
Just extend.
5 is just extend, okay?
For us, a centralized pickup location, I mean, I thought at first that sounded like a pretty good idea, but I gotta say, in Sandy, where Woodford has, you're doing the islands only, we're all distributed. So in our specific scenario, putting a centralized dumpster is going to attract customers other than Woodford customers.
Yes.
Going to be getting waste management customers filling that thing up. So just because of us and the way, you know, the geographic disbursement of your customers in Sandy, I think it's unfair. It wouldn't work out right. And even your own customers might, the dumpsters might get filled before your own customers have a chance to get to them, so. But that's just for us. It may work for other areas. That's why I said, you know, we only have we have 26,000 households in Sandy, and I think only 500 of them are with Woodford, so we're a little bit of an anomaly. Yeah.
Hang on, Greg, same question for you. Do you have one of these 6 scenarios that you prefer?
I like the idea of option 1, having a hybrid system, but at the same time, I've got the same concerns about, you know, the illegal dumping. I know that White City probably would not be in favor of a lot of the things in the second idea with charging a fee, even if it's a nominal fee. I know that most of them, even though you guys have kind of displayed that it's more cost effective to do it the way we're doing it currently, and you service a majority of the people this way, I think a lot of them do prefer having kind of how it used to be, where you drop off dumpsters in areas and rotate that throughout the neighborhood. But I think probably option 5 is kind of the best for us, I think, at this point, for what we've got here, where we're just at least extending that season and creating more opportunity for at least how we have it now.
Thanks. Sherry, you?
Yeah, I guess a couple of comments. Cindy made a comment, she talked about the original intent of the program. So what is the intent of the program, first of all, right? I think that we better make sure we for sure know that, because it sounds like we want to make people happy, or we want to pick up trash, or are we just trying to pick up the extras? What is the real intent of it? So I think that we have to have a really clear understanding of that. I do not like central locations. We do central locations in our city already, right? But part of the problem, I think, why people appreciate this other is because if you have the ability to take it to a central location, just take it to the dump. You know what I mean? It's like, I think the problem is a lot of people don't have a truck and a trailer or whatever it takes to get it to the dump. And so it makes it easy if it's there, or if it's out on the street, just to pack it out and put it in there. You can figure out a wheelbarrow or whatever you need to get it to that point. But you can't, because I think about that all the time. It's like, I could just, our city's having that. I could load it up and take it over there, and I'm like, yeah, but it's another 5 minutes and I could be at the dump, you know? And it's on my time frame and not what the city has scheduled. So sometimes I don't use it simply for that. So I have issues a little bit with a central location because of that. Like, I think that's the hiccup with people getting into the central location. 5, I don't mind 5 extend the season. The problem is cost. Again, it's like, can we afford to just keep putting more and more and more money into the trucks? Can you even get trucks? You know what I mean? It's like, great, let's get a couple more trucks in 6 years from now. We're having a hard time getting our trucks, period, right? So then it seems like that's a big issue to even accommodate that, because I don't know if we have the money or the ability to even get trucks. So the open it up, I was a little bit confused, I guess, about 2. It just seemed like maybe it doesn't. It's interesting that some of the drivers and stuff prefer this, wouldn't mind having it this way, because help me understand that a little bit more. So just district-wide, and you just schedule it in how you schedule it in, or are you going to do, like, instead of just calling it cities, you'll do regions at certain times?
Yeah, good question. So we could do it either way. And if the preference and the policy is to do it regional, you can think about the southeast side, and that's really more of a region that we do, even though Sandy Hills, White City, they might have their own day or days, depending on the size of that area. But to basically open it up so that they have this portion of the calendar. If we did it district-wide, we would basically divide up the district like quadrants, so that we try to maintain efficiencies do that with trailers now. So there's different quadrants that each of those drivers are assigned to, and then however many trailers are assigned to them. And we have a limit per day based on the miles, and the staffing, right? So we would do the same kind of concept here. I won't digress too much as far as staffing, but we're doing pretty well right now. And thank you again for the salary market adjustments. So, but did that answer your?
Yeah.
So we would make it as efficient as we possibly could. Deone, is there anything else you want to add as far as why we like those particular number two?
I think you've got it covered, Pam, so I don't have anything else.
I guess it in my back of my mind, and I don't doubt that you've already looked into this, but, I worry a little bit if we get a little bit short on drivers or a little bit short on something, and then all of a sudden, the dumpsters really shrink because we just can't cover the whole thing. But I guess the same thing with everything. Anyway, just that was my only concern with number two, was efficiency. It just seems like if you're in a central location, you can staff that, you can plan that a little bit easier than knowing, oh, up here we got this, this, and this, and then maybe we had a bad storm and now we have slammed with this area or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, just the unknown a little bit concerns me about number two. So again, number three was the one that I said that, and no one said three before me, but,
Yeah.
I'm
just
sorry,
because
3 is what?
three was probably my preference, just because part of the concern I've had too is I do not like dumpsters being there and having them half full because, or a quarter of the way full, because it's not efficient that way either to have to come out and use those dumpsters. But if, it's limited and you know you can only get a dumpster every other year, then maybe you have more fill. I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't have that much trash in your house. I don't know.
You know, Keith has a comment, just a second, but I'm almost hearing from, some of this discussion, I wonder if one option is we don't change anything.
Yeah.
I'm almost hearing that, especially if we're talking about what is the purpose even of having these containers, and do we want to expand it somehow? So maybe we ought to have an option 7, or scenario 7 is, let's just do what we're doing.
Because that would be mine. It would be
Okay,
like,
that would be
I don't
yours.
think we'll ever get to the point we have 100% satisfaction. It's never going to please all the people.
Okay,
If we can get to 80%, I think we're doing darn good to please a lot of people.
okay, so we have a scenario 7, which is we don't make any change, and we already have like 2 Yahoo, I'm on board with that, so, okay, yeah, Keith.
I just need to refresh. How long are the containers at the location? And you deliver a container, how long does it sit there?
Overnight, unless it's scheduled on a Friday or a holiday is in there.
So you drop it off on a Monday and you pick it up on a Tuesday?
Yes. Ordinarily, yes.
Not that, none of these scenarios work for us. So,
Right, you're totally there.
Totally different, but again, you're back to the Collin Hall, essentially kind of the same thing with the reservation. I get it delivered, it's there on Monday, I fill it up on Monday, you come pick it up on Tuesday, which kind of falls along that scenario of the Collin Hall. And whether or not that's feasible to expand, which is limited by materials. I need containers and I need trucks, and I need drivers. So all those things need to happen. So yeah, I just needed to refresh them. So the answer for most is don't do anything. Don't make no changes, because it is going to limit, as we see it in our collection site, is that things just get dumped. In Brighton, it's not quite a drive-by, but everybody that does something up there finds a means to discard the waste. Although we do promote the individuals to rent the trailers, as well as the distribution of the vouchers for them to take it to the landfill for free. So we're promoting those things to reduce our waste that gets left. That's kind of how that's the phrase it, left.
Right.
And that's why I needed a refresh on how long the containers were there, because it really are, you're limiting the time that person. So you have to have your materials prepared. You get the trailer, and then whether or not in the reservation system is, I'm reserving a trailer, a container. Are we trying to collect information on what's going to go in that container? Is it going to be yard waste? Is it going to be construction materials? Is it going to be a couch, beds? Because you could, I don't know if you then create, I'm not trying to create any new scenarios, but it's the same as the green waste trailers. Is it, am I collecting, what are you picking up? And is it going to be a mixed bag, or is it one type of material or another?
Right.
So if it's this material, it's going to go, I don't know where the green waste goes these days, but is it just green waste versus, because you're going to ask for a container just for green waste, because that's what my goal is, to get rid of green waste. Or I bought a house and there's a lot of junk here, and I just need to get rid of it. So I don't know how you could build that into any of the scenarios, or even the current plan is collecting the information of what's going to get picked up and where it's going to go.
So, and let me just speak to the canyons again that are different with the town of Brighton and then Immigration Canyon. They're already on this reservation system and have been for quite a number of years because it was more cost effective. And for the town of Brighton, we never had those containers out on the street like we did normally in the valley. So they have a trailer reservation, and it is trailer because of the unique terrain that's up there in the canyon. So it does go on the resident's property. It's there for 4 days, and it's a reservation that every resident in the canyon gets one per year based on availability, first come, first served. And then they also have a trailer rental available. So for the rental, that's where we really track what's going in there. Because somebody is going to rent a green trailer, that's $55, and we have to make sure that it's really green. And the driver does check that when they go pick it up. If it's contaminated, we're going to charge the full $190 to the homeowner. Whereas a reservation, we just want to make sure we're not taking any garbage out to the composting facilities.
Right. It looks like we've got hands on Robert Pignon from Tessa, and then I know Anna has a comment, and then Eric has a comment. Let's go in that order. Robert first, and then Tessa.
Thank you. Just as Pam was mentioning, the canyons are different, and we have had, as mentioned, the opportunity to make reservations. I think the challenge, as mentioned, is it's a trailer, not the dumpster, because of the size of our roadways and driveways. I would say that if we were to leave it as is, the program, we'd probably still only have, less than half a dozen a year. And correct me if I'm wrong on that are actually taking advantage of the program. In as much as we're talking about keeping it as is, I think in the canyons, it might be very beneficial to consider having a central location. And in as much as we are away from the rest of the valley, I don't see people from out of the valley coming out to the canyons from the valley to abuse the program. We do have 2 locations that would be very easy to accommodate, but it would take that extra staff to make sure it's being done orderly. So I would say for the valley, it does make sense to leave it as is, but for the canyons, you may need to find an option that the centralized option would work really well for migration. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Tessa?
So, Cofferton also has a pretty unique situation. We also are off the beaten path, so we don't tend to have a lot of extra dumping from communities surrounding us. I did put out a survey for my community to find out their thoughts and their temperature on the collection program. And the majority of the votes that I received were I had 100% of our community that did take the survey vote to have them put on the street. And when asked why, the biggest concern coming from our community is the shared driveway situation. Copperton does share their main driveway with their neighbor. So if the neighbor next door doesn't have anything to dump, but they need to be able to use their driveway, that trailer or dumpster has now blocked that driveway from being used, and we're putting people parking on the streets. We have had some negative feedback just from emergency crews, UFA, on having the streets congested with the extra cars. We do have a large percentage of people here who rent and are being managed by rental management companies, not necessarily a private landlord. That has become an issue in trying to get a reservation because they do have to have the landlord do that. So that was brought up as a concern. It was split down the middle as far as people who have reserved in the past couple years and have had a good or bad experience with that. Some people did mention that they were unable to reserve a trailer. They did vote in favor of being able to have the same people reserve each year. And the reason for that was that there are some people with additional driveways on their properties, or people who are willing to have that in their driveway and work with their neighbors to be able to get the waste disposed of. So they did not want to see that go away. The problem with keeping it the same here is that unique quality that we have. It was easiest for us to have them on the street or to have a central location here. We do have quite a few different parking lot areas that could be dispersed through town to where people could use that as a central location. I understand having things put in there that shouldn't be in there and the liability behind that, but that did seem to be the most favorable option for my residents here. It looks like there were a few other concerns in regard to the structure of our driveways. We did just complete our storm drain analysis as well as some other water line analysis, and we do have some pretty fragile lines running through some of the driveways here. Our community is over 100 years old, and there's a lot of infrastructure that does need to be repaired. So there were concerns with some cracked driveway systems, having heavy machinery coming through some of these driveways that can't take that type of pressure. So those were some of the things that we collected with our data. One of the biggest things was just having them for more than the 48 hours, or being able to come up with some other way of allowing us to do that in a weekend, or I know that's not going to work for everybody, I understand, but that was one of the biggest complaints, was just being able to get off of work in time, have that fully ready, get it loaded into the trailer before the trailer leaves. So I don't know if there's a hybrid situation that we can come up with that specifically helps out Immigration Canyon, Brighton, Copperton, areas that are a little bit more unique than what the city structures look like.
Great. Thank you, Tessa. I think we've got, Ann has a comment, and then I think Eric had an additional comment, and then it looks like Patrick Schaefer. So, Anna?
I really would prefer we just keep it the way it is right now. I think we've hired someone to run data, and I've mentioned this before. I'd like to get more data before we make any decisions about the efficiency of the dumpsters, what's in it, who's reserving them, is it repeat reservations every year. I'm not a fan of central because I think it causes more problems, more cleanup. I don't want to see a program where Warford employees are actually getting out of their trucks to load things in. I think that decreases efficiency as well as increases injuries. I guess if I had to, I like number 3. It may prove out after we gather some data. Well, it's going to take a while, a couple of years to gather the data to see if we've got repeat reservations. But I would say either keep it the same or do number 3. Number 5 is of interest to me, except for, I don't understand the difference between having cities and having districts. Frankly, I don't think it's much different on that end. And lastly, I think we underutilize simply because I think we could do more with our new website. And we put money into the website and PR. I think we could do more as far as promoting the hall and bring the dumpster and pay for the dumpster and the vouchers and some programs like that. Let me make sure. I think that was about it. So that's kind of where I'm thinking.
Great. Thanks, Anna. Eric, you have more comment?
I do. I want to make sure that everybody else that had one before me had a chance to go. I don't want to capitalize on the meeting.
Let's have Patrick. Patrick, go ahead. Patrick
Yeah.
Schaefer.
Yeah, I kind of agree a lot with Tressa a little bit. I think option 2, in my opinion, would be the best way I would go. But I also agree with everybody else saying that keeping it the same right now is a good idea. We also got to look at that we've only been doing this for 3 years now. And and it could take up to 5 to 7 years to get all the hiccups officially worked out of it, in my opinion, and get residents finally on board, except with option 2, the fourth comment in there, charging a small fee. I kind of have a problem with that. I think our customers would complain a lot about that.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Eric?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to a comment that was made earlier, and I apologize, I don't remember who made it, but it was about understanding the original intent of this program, because I think that's at the heart of the confusion of residents and the frustration. I think the problem we have is that everybody used to have access to this program by default because the dumpster was being placed in the street at a specific time of year, so nobody was excluded. And the reason that most people believe this program changed was because of COVID. But now that COVID is over, the program has fundamentally changed and there's no longer that universal access, which is driving the frustration. We know as a board, it's a financial constraint, not a COVID constraint. It's a staffing constraint, not a COVID constraint. But in the eyes and minds of our residents, this was brought on by COVID and now COVID's over, so why is it not back to normal? Additionally, if I received a reduction in what I perceived as my service, which many people were conditioned that this was just part of what they were paying for with their fees, but now I've received a reduction in that service, it feels a little off because my fee didn't change, my fee didn't go down. Now we know that costs have gone up. We're aware of the price of gas, we're aware of the price of people, but do our residents? And I think that is at the heart of the overall frustration, is that they had an expectation, that expectation changed. The reason for that change is not totally clear to them. And now that that reason is no longer there, they didn't get a reduction in cost, but they did lose what they perceive as a service. All these other little things, the parking it in my driveway or the street, whether I have to make a reservation or not, those are, I think, secondary concerns brought on by this initial concern that my service changed, and I got a reduction in service, but I didn't see a reduction in fee. And I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be way more transparent about what happened with this program and why it is where it is today. I would also support leaving it as is, but we've got to be more transparent with the residents.
Great comment. I have a couple of comments, but anyone else want to weigh in before we wrap up today's discussion?
I appreciate what just said. He wrapped it up just perfectly, and I think that's what we're all struggling with. I keep waiting for some great breakthrough idea. I'm not the one that comes up with them, but I recognize one when I see one, which is, what could we do that would be a replacement for the way we used to do it and not take away service? Dan, you said something a while ago that it was before these conversations began in earnest, and that was could we go back to the old program, but every other year instead of every year? Does that equate to, is somehow a reduction in the annual service, but giving everybody the service, but not as frequently as they once had it? Is there any world in which that solution exists, or is that a hard no to?
If you as a board wanted to set that policy, and I think if I'm understanding correctly, and we're talking about 12 communities basically, because we're not talking canyons, because that would be 14, so 12. So if I'm understanding correctly, it would be 6 municipalities 1 year, 6 municipalities the next year. Just want to make sure. And so then I think we would just need to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, with the staffing that we think we can get, and again, I think part-time is where we really lag, right? We have a hard time getting a part-time seasonal staff. We've added the 3 FTEs to help, the pool of full-time drivers to pull over to help with the delivery of containers, and we're hoping to do 60 a day this year. So we would just need to take a look at it and see, because I don't know that we can increase the number per day, if that makes sense. But could we do more days? My thought is right off the bat is that if we still are limited to the number of containers we can put out on the street, we're gonna have piles. So I guess I would just need to wrap my brain around that scenario, and we could certainly go back and take a look at that. And then the next year, I guess it would be the other 6. So my thought would be we do, Harriman through Kearns 1 year, and then Taylorsville through Cottonwood Heights. We just have to figure out the number of homes and what we can do.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, any other comments?
I do have an
Yes.
additional comment. So I believe it was Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have to agree 100%. I think one of the biggest kickbacks I've had when trying to describe what's going on with the current program has been exactly that. I also have to say, when Patrick brought up the fee, I know that's going to be a huge issue here as well. But as far as the transparency, I think coming up with some type of PR piece that we can each put out to our communities, or even utilizing the website, like another member had brought up, is huge. And just being able to use those resources to get that factual information out in a way that's going to make more sense to the community, so they understand why we're even having this discussion. To me, it sounds like, just from all the great responses, that we need to come up with what we already have and just creating a hybrid instead of trying to change it all together. I think trying to change it all together is going to continue to create more hiccups that we have to work out over the next several years. But coming up with a hybrid situation, even that just fits each of the communities, I know is a more difficult scenario. However, it sounds to me like none of our communities are exactly the same and have the same needs.
I have one more comment.
Yeah.
I guess I'll do the flip side on some of it. I agree 100% with the fee. I think we had kind of put a little fee in there this year on the budget, and I too pushed back, because part of, if you look at the evaluation of where our fees align with other private carriers and stuff like that, sometimes we're a little higher here or there, but it's because we offer a lot more services, and this is one of the services that was offered. And so I understand we have to look at the numbers on that and understand how much it's really costing us, but so that was kind of an issue. But I have several residents who like this program better because they feel like it's an increase in their service, because they never could put anything in the dumpsters when they all have to work. If they're out on the street, people fill them. You have contractors fill them. I have a neighbor across the street that uses loader and loaded it up before anybody could get to it. Right? So there's a lot of our residents, especially out in my area, that couldn't put anything in it anyway because it was full by the time they got home from work. So I think there's both sides to the story. So they're like, good, we can have it here, and I can actually put my stuff in it. And then if my neighbors want to come put something in it after I get it full, then they can, kind of thing. So it's just, yeah, I think, Tessa, you're right. It's just different communities have a different experience with that, for sure.
Okay. Well, I think that, any other comments before I make a comment? This has been a fantastic discussion, and let me sort of summarize the way I see this. I haven't heard anybody speak in favor of 4 and 6. I think we ought to just strike those. Let's keep the same numbers though, just skip those numbers.
Okay.
And, it sounds like 1, 2, and 5 are somewhat popular, 3 also. Interestingly, it sounds like we're gonna add a 7, which is to make no change. So my feeling is, I'm concerned that we not give, administrative whiplash to the residents by making too many changes. So I'm actually in favor of 7, I think. I'm with Anna and several others, that perhaps until we get some more data, maybe we stick with 7, and then maybe we look for a hybrid system, but let's not leap to any sort of conclusion. I actually for a long time did like the idea of going back to the future and seeing if we could do it every year or even every 3 years. I mean, for example, if you have a fridge, your refrigerator is not going to break down every year. So even if we could, I would be interested in Pam's running some numbers on what if we did it every 2 years, like the old system, the old area cleanup system, or even every 3 years. So in other words, it would be 4 municipalities a year instead of 6. But I think my thought is we continue this discussion. Let's strike 4 and any objection from anybody if we strike 4 and 6. We've had a great discussion. Maybe even on the scenarios, Pam, you could mark, who has thumbs up on what scenarios.
Okay.
And let's just continue the discussion. But again, there's no hurry that we leap to some sort of big change. But on balance, I'm wondering if we stick with 7 until we can assemble some more data. Is everybody okay with that philosophy moving forward? Okay, great. I haven't heard any nays. So let's move on in the agenda. Let's move
You gotta
that.
figure the answer is in either drones or driverless trucks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and maybe Mack Truck can get us some electric vehicle as well. So, all right, so let's move on to 3.3. Pam, if you want to just dive right into all the subparts of your general manager's report, look forward to that.
Yeah, so let's start off with the electric truck and testing that. We were scheduled to receive that truck on March 13th. It actually arrived last Wednesday on site. There were some problems with the mechanics of the truck, which can happen with a newer technology. So we did get it here. Again, we had some things we had to iron out as well with the truck. And then just to note that we do not have a way to charge that truck here on site. There are 2 charging stations over at Salt Lake County Fleet. This is across the track. There are 220s, which is for our dryers, so to speak. And then the truck actually requires a 440 charge. So we could plug it in, but it would take 3 days to get it to where we needed it. So to go back to Mac every night to get charged. So we're thinking that we'll, logistically, Andy King, our asset manager, has been working out all of the logistics. They did take it out on route to test out how it basically took on garbage. So we're just going to test it, and I can report back more. There is an agreement in place that basically we are assuming liability. So we do have a certificate of insurance through the Utah Local Governments Trust. Took some time to iron out the agreement and who's going to be responsible for what. Of course, I want to make sure that I'm being diligent, trying to make sure we're not going to be held liable for certain things we shouldn't. So Rachel was instrumental in reviewing that agreement. Thank you. And then Ryan Hatch from the trust also reviewed it just to make sure we're all comfortable. So it'll be here until Wednesday, April 5th. The thought has come up and the question has been asked is, do we want to do any kind of a promotional thing? Do we want to wait and see how things go? I mean, how much PR do we want to put towards this? It's kind of a question for you as a board. And I know I'm springing it on you, but if you want to think about it, we can come back to that thought.
I have a comment. I'll comment on that if that's okay. I'd like to see how that works for a few months before we do a lot of PR on it.
Okay.
Because just like our scrap program, the reality is different from their perception.
It's cool, but we don't have, we have to take it all the way back there to charge it. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have the infrastructure, and they are really expensive.
Really.
And we don't know the technologies there that we would wanna
Yeah.
buy into it, so to speak, yet. Let the private lead out, we'll just test it.
I agree.
Okay. All right. Moving into, creativity at work, this is, our management team brainstorming, trying to find ways to recruit and retain drivers, CDL drivers in particular. So, they've come up with an apprentice career ladder, thought, and it's spearheaded by Andy King, our asset manager, and Renee Platt, who is instrumental in projects that come up. Thank you so much. I have steps here and key concepts behind it. I don't know if Andy's in the room, no? Renee, would you like to just kind of give a briefing on what this entails?
Sure. So what we're looking at is basically different levels based on, when they come into the organization, saying, okay, what's their direction? What do they want to go towards? And so no experience, some experience, CDL, no CDL. So essentially there's 4 different pathways based on their experience and whether or not they have a CDL. And then what type of investment us as an organization can make in their career, but also making sure that they're fully committed before we pay for their CDL school. So creating our own certification, I guess you could say, and using the National Waste Recycling testing and assessment program, and using that as an internal certification, and then we say, okay, if you don't have a CDL, we'll go ahead and invest in you. But then, if we invest in you, making sure that you stay with us a minimum of 1 year, and make sure that full investment pans out. So that's a little bit of what direction we're going, and we should have just about everything in place to present it to Pam, and then hopefully to you all next month.
And these are mainly the scrap ground crew that are coming in, no CDL, or newbies with a CDL coming in for scrap. They don't quite meet those minimum of a year of experience. That's what we really like, because that's, a very complicated piece of equipment, that side little truck. And we want to make sure that they're ready before we hand them the keys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can be sure, Keith. So just out of curiosity, this investment that we're talking about, is there actually a cost in sending an individual through a CDL training process?
There's a small cost.
Okay.
We tend to use Rusty in our Public Works Department to really help us. And so I think it's more the employee cost.
Yeah.
So we have to meet with Rachel to iron, those things out. So to make sure that we're in compliance with anything like that, so.
And the CDL, David, remind me of the cost of the CDL?
Just the financial cost with the entry level driver training portion, is like $50 a day. And there's 2 days of actual driver training that needs to be documented in order to actually sit the road test.
$100, and that's why we want to make sure they're going to commit to stay with us.
And not go to a neighboring industry, company, 2 weeks after they have the.
For sure.
Yeah, we don't want to be the training ground.
Yes.
We do if they stay. Okay, I'll just keep rolling if that's all right, and then I do want to introduce Shane Norris. Would you mind coming on up here? You can sit next to Paul. And Shane Norris is our safety and emergency preparedness coordinator. He is a tall drink of water. He's a former firefighter, came from Tennessee to Utah quite a few years back, worked for South Florida Fire as well, training, et cetera. I do want to, again, thank you and let you know how grateful I am that you approved this allocation and this FTE. Shane has done a great job coming in and evaluating where are we with safety trainings and then also emergency preparedness. And so there are some deficiencies, and I told him, he said, now, you know, he showed me a list. I said, I get it. There's no huge expectation that we accomplish all of these all at once. So it is a plan that he's putting together. So I'm gonna, unless you have anything else you want to add about yourself or coming in, I can kick off with the call.
Spoke way highly of me, so I'll just leave it at that.
So I'm gonna kick it off, and then Shane's gonna chime in with where we're at. Just to state that we do have policies in place that, you as a board, well, your basically predecessors adopted way back when on emergency planning and policies and procedures. So the district's policies are in chapter 17, emergency response. And basically we develop a plan internally, making sure that we're able to respond in emergencies. I think that we've done well in what we've faced so far. In 2020, there was the earthquake, the pandemic, the earthquake in Magna, and then the big windstorm on September 8th. And I was out with back surgery in the fall, and David stepped in and did a great job. So I think we've been muddling through very well. And then the snowstorms this year, you know, we need to manage those situations, and it's mainly making sure we keep going with our operations. One of the things to note is that we are considered second responders. We are not first responders. We don't go in when an event happens. We wait, and we do an assessment. And basically what that means is we work with public works departments in a city, in the county, whoever is in charge of going in and assessing the situation, and then we hear from them, a municipality, of what do you need for us to help. So the biggest thing is debris management, and looking at debris management, cleaning up the big stuff, the bulky stuff. So with that, and being that source, it mainly understand we have the hook lifts that have the containers, so the 14-yard containers, we have the trailers, and then we have the rear loaders. Those are our three resources to use in debris management. They are all diesel operated. So they are very versatile. The trailers are more maneuverable through, you know, roads that are covered with debris. Same with the containers. The rear loaders are a little bigger, but we can have them at a central site and empty debris that way. So there is some planning efforts and training, really, is the big one. We've really we've slacked off. This is where I talked about a gap, where we have a gap. It's training. We are way behind in training our staff on the NIMS, the National Incident Management Systems, and the ICS Incident Command System. So we're going to get back in line with that, and I'm thankful that Shane is here to help us to do that. So the thing to also point out, I know that mutual aid agreements are on our radar. I'm still trying to iron out exactly who we need to have mutual aid agreements with, because understand, I want to state this, our first priority is to take care of our residents in the district. Anything outside the district, I believe, needs to be board policy and board approved, because these are our resources, right? And when I talk about mutual aid agreements, do we really need to have mutual aid agreements with our cities that exist? Possibly, if we need to get funding back, if there's an incident that happens only in Harriman, you know, would we need to have a mutual aid agreement to get reimbursed for any resources we expend to help Harriman, et cetera? So my guess is we need to do that, and I'm going to be tapping Rachel to help out with some of those. There's an overarching Salt Lake County Public Works and other public works entities mutual aid agreement, but it seems a lot bigger than what we would need. Still need to evaluate that. And then one of the other things to note is that we did the CARES Act, right? So there was the COVID, and we approached each of you as municipalities to ask for reimbursement for COVID leave, which we received. We did not have an agreement in place. In all honesty, I don't think that we needed one. We just went ahead and did it, and it happened. But in the future, would we need that? So these are questions and considerations that we're evaluating as we go. And then just so you know, on 17.3, emergency expenditures, you can authorize me to spend up to $500,000 in event of emergency. Of course, the hope is we would get that back, right? So I've talked to Paul and Matt and kind of given them a heads up that they may go back to DC or Emmitsburg, I believe it is, to learn how to get reimbursements for FEMA, you know, understand how to fill out those forms, et cetera. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm gonna let Shane take it over. And before I do, one of the things I do want to point out is, he mentioned it as well to me, that first sentence underneath the statement of standards of operating procedures is that in an event of emergency, our first priority is to make sure our staff are okay. And that's part of that COOP calling tree.
I do have a question.
Yes.
Have we considered when there's a major natural disaster and we have some major cleanup, do we have an agreement with the different landfills about how that works and who gets what first and where and how?
Right now, we do not, council members, or board members, Stringham.
That's probably something we need to look at, because in a major cleanup and stuff, especially if we're looking at a disaster of, you know, of larger proportion, there's got to be a place to take the refuge and things that are being cleared out. I've been watching some of the earthquakes and things that are happening around the world, and that's one of the biggest problems they have is where do they put it when they're trying to clear it out, because it's everywhere, right? And if there's a plan of where to go first, where to go second, where to go third, that was one of the things I was hearing from some of the disaster specialists I've spoken with, that they didn't know where to take things.
Yeah, good point. So in the past, we've had tabletop exercises and designated areas of where the debris would go. Again, it's debris management first, and then continuity of services of the curbside wherever we can, and trying to stay on schedule. So your point is very valid, and I know in the past there were staging areas that were designated. For example, the windstorm on September 8th, there was a staging area up at the salt pile on Wasatch Boulevard where Holiday and East Mill Creek, Mount Olympus all took their debris, their green waste, and dumped it there. And then from there, we also helped to haul that off to the landfill for disposal. So oftentimes we're not the ones to designate where that goes, but we certainly want to make sure we're aware, and if there is a need for an agreement to be able to take the waste, we want to make sure we have that in place. Very good point, thank you. Okay.
Again, before you see the line items and the items we came up with, my understanding, just in my training with NIMS and everything, we're just going to fall under, if you're familiar with the incident chart, how organization chart and everything, how it works, we're going to be in the logistics standpoint. We're just going to submit to whomever, the EOC, whether it's your city, district, the county, we're just going to submit, this is what we have, this is the assets we have, we're here for you, and then we'll go from there. If we're needed, they can move us over to an operational standpoint. Other than that, we're just secondary, we're just waiting to see what they need. In the event that there is something large scale with the question that was just asked, the EOC is going to determine the drop-off place. They'll be the ones, because we may not be able to get to the landfill or to a center. So the EOC will say, this is probably the best location, this is out of the way, this is going to be out of the way of emergency responders. And they'll designate a spot, more likely that we'll take the debris and whatever from the earthquake. Continuity of operation plan, the COOP, our calling tree. I'm in the process, we're getting that updated now. And essentially, it's just when there's an emergency, Pam initiates it, and it goes down to the chain of command, the system through David, Paul, and it just goes out to the branches, just so everybody, and then once it's done, all the reports go back up to assume that everyone's been contacted in the event of emergency. Come in. 72-hour kits. This is something that I think it's kind of nice that it's a benefit that I consider for the employees, just having a 72-hour kit for everybody to make sure they just feel like they're safe. So it can cost a little bit to put these things together. We're trying to get this updated. I've presented Pam a few options. Just how do we want to handle this? What's our budget standpoint for that? We go from there, and I'm just waiting on the green light from her, which direction she'd like to go. Evacuation plan, working again with, they mentioned Rusty upstairs, the emergency coordinator for the county. Just getting everything, I want to be on the same page because we do share the building with them, that we're doing the same thing, that we're not, conflicting with their plan. So she and I are working together, just coming up with plans, strategic options for the building here. And then, Andres here has helped me with the emergency evacuation plans for the drivers when they're out in their cities, where to go. So that's coming in with the central gathering locations. Obviously, we know radios, use of satellites. Coming up with the essential records for FEMA. That would just be the, basically for HR. That's a different type of classes they'll be taking with the NIMS classes, HR, payroll, going from there, just to make sure if there is something that we have all the data, if we can get back to the building, get it to our servers. The toy book is just our inventory. What do we have? What are our assets? Just so we can, if something does happen, we can go back and look at it and say, oh, we just have a sheet of paper that just goes right down with our inventory. Current staff trainings, our NIMS and ICS, we've fallen behind in the past few years. So what I'm doing now is I've got the data, the past data, and I'm trying to correlate that with the new employees, who's came and who's went, who has what, who needs what additional training. We're trying to come up with a way to get the drivers in here in front of a computer to do the ICS FEMA training, in addition to the office staff, making sure everyone's doing the right thing. First aid and CPR, we have purchased some new equipment, mannequins, training AEDs. I am certified as a trainer, so that's going to come with everyone. I would say the first of the summer, the training will start being rolled out from there. And then basic first aid, whoever wants it in the staff will be also additional. Emergency preparedness and planning for response, just like again, tabletop, waiting on the shakeout to happen. We're going to roll out a little bit of training for that, just kind of what to expect with the shakeout. And then what I'm really looking for is the data collected after the shakeout. What went right, what went wrong, what are our needs, what are some of the assets, and holding on that data and building our plan up from there. The rest is just kind of basic. Is our plan with what we're going to do for the shakeout and things. So if there are any questions or anything that I can answer,
Shane, thank you so much. I do have one question on the ICS and the NIMS training. Is that something the board needs to be trained on too, or especially the ICS?
I can't, obviously, from my position, I can't direct the board in any direction. But I would think as representatives of your community, you would want to understand, because you're going to be the ones calling into your local EOCs or the county EOCs in the event of an emergency, because they're going to need your input, your guidance, and actually your vote on the expenditures and everything. So I would recommend it in your position, yes.
I mean, I think most of us are probably getting NIMS and training with our cities, but I'm just wondering how that works with this. This is a governmental entity, and I just wonder how that dovetails. I don't know.
Yeah, no, good question. So I think the training that you get with your respective municipality is key. And hopefully we can have visits to each of your municipalities and speak to city managers, administrators, and then you as a board member to walk through the what ifs, and in this case, what are we going to need from you as a board? And I think coming back to you as a board as a whole to walk through what we would really need, I think would be instrumental. And I would say that yes, it's going to be needed and down the road part of this. If that's okay. Good? All right.
I can add to that. I know FEMA offers training for council members, mayors, and about their roles in the
Might be a big road trip. I guess you'd have to fly. Yeah, thank you, Matt. And then just to introduce Andre, Peralta, right back here, he's our GIS coordinator. And want to make sure that you are introduced to Andre. He's been busy. He was at the board meeting in February, I believe, when I was introducing people, but I didn't see him online. So he's here in person. You can definitely recognize him. He's been, as Shane mentioned, he's been instrumental in carving out the mapping for residential routes and then also looking at staging and so forth. Welcome. Great asset for us, very knowledgeable. Any questions for me or Shane regarding emergency preparedness? I will just point out that part of the evaluation that Shane has been doing, you'll see that third sentence down on further considerations and plans. One of the big ticket items that has been kind of in the forefront of our minds and then really came to the right in our face, so to speak, is the our CNG fueling island out across the tracks there. It does not have a cover. We've explored the thought of having a carport and better lighting out there in the past. I think we really need to go forward and try to figure out how much would that cost and bring that back to you as a board, because as you can imagine, in the winter, in that snow, we had crews out there trying to get the snow removed before the drivers came in. We would have a delayed start on some of the days. As you may know, we canceled on February 22nd because it was just 2 feet of snow. I didn't want drivers trying to get here to the office and then let alone trying to get the truck out to go out. So it was easy. It was the best thing to just cancel and let our residents know we were going to be delayed one day. Going forward. So the other thought is it's dark in the morning, especially during the winter, and although we might provide the headlight, flashlight, they get misplaced, or drivers are out there with their phones trying to do their pre-trip inspection, because that is required by law. With commercial driver's license, they have to do a pre-trip inspection on the equipment that they're about to operate. So I appreciate Shane coming in and trying to fill the gap as much as we can until we can really do a big evaluation and see what it might cost.
Yeah, this sounds like something we ought to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, we need some infrastructure over there. And then one thing to note is that Renee and McKenna have been working with Emily Pesquet at the Economic Development Office for the Mayor's Office of Salt Lake County. And she has been talking to them about CNG grants for CNG related, and then also for electric. I don't know if you wanted to, you had your hand up, sir.
Oh, I was pointing that we may have some questions up here on the board. I just wanted to, but yes, we met with her last week and looking to see if we can get in line for some funding, especially for CNG from the federal government next year. So yeah, there's a lot of funds out there in part of some of those programs. So we wanted to get in line. Okay.
Yeah, Tessa and Lori, did you have questions or comments?
I do not.
Hit the button, take your.
Okay, that just may have been a residual hand waving, so. Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
All right, so we'll move on to succession planning concept. This is just something that I wanted to make sure I let you all know that this is on my radar. I am paying attention to the fact that there are leadership positions within our organization, people in those positions that are setting sights on retirement within the next 5 years. And so the thought is that we, knowing how challenging it can be to try to recruit people, because especially with the low unemployment rate, that to recruit people with talent, skill, and maybe even experience in this particular industry can be a challenge. So in looking internally to develop the talent that we have, and that includes the frontline equipment operators, knowing that there are supervisory positions that they've got their sights set and the drivers are already aware. So they've approached me on opportunities. If they wanted to take courses, what should they take? And then also with managers, if they have an interest in moving up, here's some ideas. HR is huge with management. We have the WFWRD University that has been the vision for a couple of years. It's started, and so I'm hoping, once we secure a talented HR manager, that we can have them come in and help really set sails on that vision. But at any rate, I just wanted you to know it is on my radar. I'm not naive to the fact that we have a veteran workforce, not aging, veteran. So, anyway, these are the key concepts, just so you know it's on my radar. Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, any questions about the general manager's report? Okay, let's move on to 3.4, which is the cost benefit analysis for CNG and versus diesel from input from both Pam and from Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just kick it off, and just to give some background here, I think you're familiar with how we evolved into CNG of replacing diesel trucks with CNG, because that was the policy of the board from way back when, even before we separated. And we have the on-site fueling station that has 58 ports, and we have about that many CNG trucks with 2 front loads and then the 56 side load trucks. So just to comment and point out that this isn't the first time that the board has had this discussion, although it was 6 years ago. So I think with board turnover, with staff turnover, I think it's going to come up again, which is great, because I think it's worth the question. And then just to point out that during the September 25th, 2017 board meeting, we talked to the board about, here's the policy, but what about an emergency? There's no question that diesel trucks could make us more nimble, no question, with side load. Understanding that an emergency, again, is that degree management that's going to be the first launch of resources. The board quickly moved to the air quality, and I think that was one of the discussions that came up when we talked about this. What is the impact on air quality? And there's some discussion, some debate around that as well. So the board did have that discussion and debate. We had Dr. Robert Payne on the board at that time, and he is an MD, a pulmonologist, so he specializes in lung disease and so forth. He also served on the Utah Air Quality Board of Directors. He was really adamant about the concern with the nitrogen dioxide that was emitted with the diesel trucks, and it is less than the CNG trucks. He was very focused on that. The board talked about the emergency preparedness and asked us to bring back, how many fueling sites for CNG are off-site in case anything happens to this one. So we brought back information to say that there were 3 sites at that time off-site. So we would be pretty dependent on the site here. So in having these new discussions, just before I move on, the board basically said we want to stay with CNG, and feeling like that in an emergency, we could respond initially with the equipment that is diesel, and really the only issue would be what happens to this site here, and then would there be enough sites away from here to fuel with CNG. So still scroll down just a little bit. So in looking at air quality, because it does seem to be a direction that people want to know what's going on with emissions. So in reaching out to the air quality question, and Tammy Bostic is the executive director of Utah Clean Cities Coalition. I was just basically trying to find any tailpipe research. And it was interesting to know that the tailpipe emissions, they have a lot on diesel. As far as the tailpipe for CNG, what actually comes off of that tailpipe, there's not a lot. They have a wheel or a well to wheel, which is basically where you drill for the CNG to get to the truck. But what happens when it comes off the truck? But we know for sure that the emissions of the nitrogen dioxide is lower with CNG. That they know for sure.
How do they know that for sure if they don't have
Yeah, the tailpipe, and,
It seems like it's maybe a tagline just to promote a product.
could be.
It just concerns me that if you say they know for sure, it's like, well, then how do they know for sure if they don't have the data?
I guess I can say that the diesel, they know what.
They know what the diesel does,
Yeah.
but we don't know if it's any worse or any better than the other.
Yeah, so Tammy did ask for a little more time to gather that information and bring it back. Salt Lake City, I think there's this, sustainability offices and their air quality department, I believe, has some of that data. I have not been able to obtain that yet. I know that they're knee deep in budget, and so to try to get that, it's been a little struggle.
This is another, maybe a good comment, but sometimes it concerns me if it's something that they're really sure that it's better and they're excited about, usually that data is not very hard to obtain. So if it seems like it's really hard to obtain, then it concerns me that it's not easily attainable, it's so much better.
Okay. So, the question, let me just turn my page here before we get to the cost analysis. So in looking at our current site and talking to our provider of the CNG, and I wanted to make sure I did an on-site evaluation before, to bring before you so I can ask about Clean Energy as our fuel station vendor, and we contract with Salt Lake County Fleet to get that CNG. So I talked to the division director of Fleet, who's Greg Newsman, and basically asked him, what if something happens in an emergency? And he stated that Clean Energy, the fuel station vendor, installed 2 compressors at our site specifically for emergency situations. So if one went down, the other would take over. I can't imagine you won't be able to get CNG in an emergency. Off-site may be a little more inconvenient, but you could get it if ever the site goes down. He also was confident about if there was a break, that they could fix that pretty quickly. He didn't give me a time frame. I think it just depends on where and how big that break might be. So looking at the off-site fueling stations and that evaluation, and one of the things I want to point back to is in 2017, the board, with all of the CNG grants that were coming out at that time, they wanted to wait and see if there were more fueling sites that were going to be available off-site from here. And at the time, again, there was 3 sites, and now there are 15 looking at this. There are some out to the southwest, understanding that there are many out to the north of us, which may not be as convenient, which speaks to Greg's point, it may not be convenient. And then there is one at Ace Disposal at the West Jordan Yard. That is a slow fill overnight. However, they don't have enough ports to help us out, but they did say that they could put in a fast fill if needed. But understanding there's also one not too far from their yard at the 66 or 7-Eleven, I can't remember which one it is. And then the Utah Transit Authority, I have not had a chance to reach out to them, but they do have a slow fill as well. And, could we fill there? Understanding that, Taylorsville's right there. There are some of our service areas that are close there. So, again, I think it was, just to know that we did evaluate an off-site satellite location to help with efficiencies in the southwest. Paul, Andy, and I looked at that, David. There's no question that could help with costs, whether it's CNG or whether it's diesel. Some of the logistical challenges were what prevented us from moving forward with that. What I mean by that is staff. So we have staff reporting on site. What's the support going to be like for them? We have trucks that will be parked off-site. What about getting them back here for maintenance and so forth? So, is that something we could certainly look at going forward with that? We could. I hope this is the right. Okay, go ahead and scroll down. I hope, no, it's not. Okay, I believe the one that's printed in your packet is, the one, I thought we replaced that, sorry. If you go to the H drive and go into the folder, then you probably have to change what you're sharing. So, Paul and I looked at this again once we, I apologize, the packet went out before we got the updated version in your packet. So I believe the one that's printed in before you is correct. There we go, March. And yeah, if you want to just pull up that one. Or did you pull up the one that was on your email? Okay, yeah, if you want to pull this one up, this one has the correct, and then you can share that. Nope, guess not. It is in the packet. It's in that folder though. Yeah. Sorry about this. You go to the CNG versus diesel benefit. Yes, that's the correct one. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Stand by. Up to the right. Yeah, that one. Thanks. Thanks, Renee. Appreciate it. Okay. So anyway, that's where it talks about the satellite, and we can certainly evaluate that again this year. Again, it is logistics. One thing in talking with ACE, they have their West Jordan yard. They opened that up, I think it was 2 years ago. Understanding they've been serving South Jordan and West Jordan for many years. It took a long time because of the logistics of opening up a satellite location. So it can take some time to make sure everything's in place before it happens. Okay. Any questions for me before we move into?
I just have a quick question. We'll always get those tax credits?
Not necessarily, no.
That's it.
I would not, we did,
will not offset.
well, and on some years, they've actually come back a year after, or a year and a half after in a retro, and then they weren't in place, and then with the Inflation Reduction Act, they got needed, and so far they have. I didn't think they were going to twice, and then they've come back and done it, and it's been retroactive, so to me, I think so, but I don't think it's a slam dunk.
So it's nothing that we can budget necessarily, because it's good when they do, but that can be taken away.
Well, I need to look and see, I think there's actually an end date now, I think it's 2024, but I'm not sure. So if they had that, then I'd be more confident. But before sometimes they haven't done it, and then a year and a half after they've done it, and they're retro, and in that case, you don't budget for it.
Okay, that's my only, because if we're like 65,000, it's a benefit, but we're 122,000, that's what we're getting, so would not be a benefit in that case.
I have just a quick question. The purchasing CNG fuel versus diesel, it looks like there's a $2,500 savings account. Savings to buy CNG.
2.5 million?
Yeah. So we're saving that, correct, by using CNG? Does that include the 122,000?
Yes, what we have, let's look at the spreadsheet here. Can we move forward, Renee, and we'll show this? Let's just work through this and see if this answers your questions. I think it will. So we were asked, at a board meeting, I think 2 board meetings ago, as far as just a diesel versus CNG side load truck comparison. And so that's what I try to put together. This is for an individual truck. And this is really looking forward, going forward. We're not gonna go back I mean, the past is the past. We've gotten benefits, we had costs to set up the fueling stations. I think we got some funding for that, but we're just looking forward on this. And so, wanted to do this. This is for an individual truck. And so, as far as what we looked at, just starting with the CNG, the current approximate price of purchase price of a CNG truck, about $416,000. And so, when we look at that, that's the current purchase price. And then I went down, I had the approximate sales price. Right now, and this is our best estimate, we think diesel trucks sell for about $40,000 more than CNG. and I kept that in place. Our sale last year, we sold, some CNG trucks, 4 of them for about, I think it was 65,000. And so what I did was I assumed a 2% inflation factor in this per year, and that's why the 65,000 approximate sales price is 75,000. Now, you can say, yeah, maybe it should be 4%, and then it goes to 2, I don't know. I thought, let's put 2 in there anyway, and it makes it a little more realistic. And so I did increase 2% a year, and I also increased the fuel by 2% and cost of maintenance by 2%. So going down, just got the estimated miles per truck, and that's based on our total fleet. And so I took the total miles divided by our total side load fleet, and so some trucks would definitely have more than that. Other trucks that are in the shop or repairs and maintenance would have less. And so looking at that, estimated cost of CNG per gasoline gallon equivalent, 1.91, and that's about where we ended up in 2022. Estimated miles per gallon, 1.58. And that's an interesting thing. Diesel actually does better on the miles per gallon, and diesel trucks have. We can look down in the diesel category, but we estimated 2 miles per gallon now. It used to be higher than that, even diesel, but they've had a lot of emission requirements. I don't know how many of you have diesel trucks, but DEF, and they required a selective catalytic reduction in 2010. And so what the EPA's done over time is actually decreased the miles per gallon in diesel and made their engines cleaner, but not quite as efficient when it comes to miles per gallon. And so that's one thing that's interesting to know. And so just going down here though, we continue to go down, estimated miles per gallon, and then I got an estimated cost of CNG. This is an annual cost per year for a side load truck. Went down, the next line items, estimated cost of maintenance. And this is the same for both CNG and diesel, and I'm not sure, I did some research, I looked at that. And if you look at the CNG folks, they tell you it's much better for CNG engines. You look at some coming from other sources and they say not really. I talked with a couple people who got different stories, and then I talked with Andy, our asset manager, and he said he really thinks they're probably similar because a lot of our maintenance is the arm and the hopper or the back of the truck, and he goes, that's going to be the same regardless of whether it's CNG and diesel. And so I kept maintenance the same. I reserve the right to change that if I get better information or I feel confident about it. And so anyway, going down there, just the total estimated cost, $415,000 purchase price in the year one. What I did was just add those, so we got a cumulative cost of a CNG side load truck over 7 years. I was thinking that's about how long we keep them right now. That's subject to change too. Going down, similar analysis for diesel trucks. Approximate purchase price, $390,000, so they're about $26,000 less than CNG right now. I think that used to be a bigger difference, and I think they've come up, and that's closed down a little there. And then the sales price, $105,000 is what I used, and then that increases 2% a year. Estimated miles the same, estimated cost of diesel, and this is where the real difference is, 4.76 per gallon. And so that and the estimated miles per gallon is actually higher. We estimated that at 2. I think it used to be higher than that. But estimated cost of diesel and then the estimated cost of maintenance. Oh, and I wanted to point out one thing too. I did up on CNG, that estimated CNG rebate is in there going forward. So I did put that in here.
Oh, so it's not.
Yes, I did credit. Yes, that's the tax, that's the CNG rebate, that 2,196. So I did put it in here and assume we're going to get it going forward. I think it is, like I said, I need to look and see. I think the law that passed is through 2024. But I did put it in there just because they've done it every year. I don't know on budgeting, like I said, unless if I know for sure on the budget, I'd be hesitant to put it in.
Yeah, that's pretty conservative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so going down back to diesel again, our estimated total cost of diesel, and then estimated cumulative cost of diesel, diesel side load pickup. We can look over time, and it's interesting down at the difference line item, just based on the purchase price and the fueling savings, by year 2, we pretty much recoup that extra cost of the purchase price. Now, you still have to recoup the sales price that's going to come later. Looking at this, we can see in year 2, we've recouped the additional purchase price based on the cost that we have for CNG and diesel, and assuming that relationship's going to stay in the future, which may not be a great assumption, but we'll see where it ends up at. So, anyway, looking at this and going across, I added up the difference every year, and in total, it's $65,000 benefit for a CNG side-load truck. And so, that's assuming, I have my assumptions down at the bottom, some of them, CNG rebate continues, maintenance costs are similar, and costs increase 2% annually. And so right now, to me, when I look at it, CNG side-load trucks, really financially, there's not much of a question. They're a benefit to us, and that's, from a financial perspective. And as Pam said, because I was concerned about emergencies and that type of thing, but really a lot of the vehicles we use for emergencies are diesel right now anyway. The trucks will pull the trailers, the hook-lift trucks, that type of thing. And so from my perspective, the CNG trucks right now financially make a lot of sense for us. So.
I just have one comment, and I don't disagree. If I look at these, the only caveat is these things right here. If the rebate goes away, then you go, do they? And if it sounds like the history of it was a huge chunk due to air quality. So if you, as you just described, diesel, their miles per gallon has gone down because they've addressed a ton of air quality issues with the requirements. So then it's interesting to know if those are similar, the CNG versus the diesel, and that argument goes away, and the tax rebate goes away, then it's like, then we have to look which ones do we use, and then maybe at that point it's just a financial decision, because this year diesel or cheaper and extra CNG. I don't know, I mean, you can't really do that because fueling stations and stuff too, but there's a caveat with fueling stations too, because we're seeing more of them, but certainly diesel is more available. So, anyway, this is great for now, but I just think that's the biggest question to me, is that rebate goes away, then what do we do? And I want to see those air quality.
Yeah, I did too. And then the fuel too, I mean, if you would have looked at this 2 or 3 years ago, diesel wasn't much more than CNG at that point in time, and then diesel with the miles per gallon, I think if this was ran 3 years ago or 2 years ago, you probably would have a different answer.
I think we can too.
And diesel and those fuels are, CNG is not as volatile as diesel.
Yeah.
They're both somewhat volatile, but diesel's just been so volatile the last couple of years. And so it's really, as of a point in time, subject to change.
Just a follow-up comment, it seems like we're sort of in a place technologically and culturally where we don't necessarily want, and this applies to electric vehicles as well. We need to explore the technology and get the best we can, but I don't think we're at a place where we want to put all of our eggs in one basket. And commit all of our infrastructure or all of our purchase money to buying CNG vehicles, and if that rebate goes away, the same thing is true with electric vehicles. So, and maybe it's going to change in 5 years or something, but it seems like right now we're in a good place with having both diesel and CNG and experimenting with the electric. So.
Yeah, a little diversified portfolio.
Right.
Exactly.
I'm just wondering too, on the sales value, because if CNG is becoming more available and you're seeing more trucks out there, does that mean that over time the sales value is going to be driven upward based on market conditions, right?
Yeah, I don't know, because I think one thing to me, and you start looking and you think about it, a lot of like garbage trucks, yes, CNG is really popular in the cities and big areas, but you get out in rural areas and they're still going diesel 100%, and I don't think a lot of them really see a change to CNG or electric unless if it's forced on them, just from a fueling and a station standpoint, and then just kind of the logistics of it too. And so I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. I think CNG definitely got more popular, and we'll see what happens. And then the other thing which I neglected to mention, and this one's kind of tough, is when we sell our CNG, when we looked at this and got the current sales price, we have that, and then we estimate it out. And then we also talked to Salt Lake City, what they were selling diesel. But another factor in this, which I got brought to my attention is, there's other factors, it's not just the engine, it's the arm. And the arm that we have right now is not as popular as the one we're currently buying or well accepted. And so it's not just the engine, there's other parts in it too that we need to consider. And so we'll see, I do think CNG definitely got more popular. I think big cities and those type areas use it. You get out in rural areas, I get out quite a bit, and there's not much CNG when you get in the back, more rural areas of Utah or Montana, Wyoming, those type of places.
To speak to that, I had a conversation with Matt Salzberg, the president of ACE, and I have a network of folks at Cadre to try to get experts and hear what's happening, not just with the NWRA, but what's going on in the private sector. And he said flat out that they're going CNG and electric. And I was a little bit caught off guard by that, but he basically said that their diesel will mainly be used in Tooele and then in Wyoming, because it speaks to the point of where is it available, where's CNG available. So anyway, just to prove Paul's point there.
Well, great report. Thank you so much, Pam, especially Paul. Thank you for putting those numbers together. Okay, I don't think we have a closed session today. Any other board business? Any other business or comments from the board? All right, if not, it looks like for the next meeting, we're going to have 2023 first quarter financial report, Pam's report, and continued discussion on the scrap services. So, Pam, anything we've missed?
I don't think so. One of the things, we talk about the data and trying to collect and relook at our data. So, Jorge Benitez has been with us now for 3 months. Going on 3 months. 3 months. So he's developed a management information system for us already. He's got some indicators in their reports for tonnages, costs, et cetera. So we're hoping to have a little more data and information for that. The first quarter report, we break into program cost accounting as well, to really try to provide that information for you. We won't have much on scrap yet, because it will just be early rolling out, but.
Well, I'd make a comment on that, Dan, even if you don't really have, more data, we don't even have to have that on the agenda unless there's like some more of it requested things, like here's some more data that might help make some decisions. What are you going to do with that?
Not much more.
If there's not much more to talk about because we're still waiting on some data to develop.
For sure. So this can.
You mean for scrap? Okay.
Yeah,
Make sure.
I agree. So we can keep that as a placeholder in our agenda, but probably not have much more.
Feel pressured about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good.
And I just want to make sure there is the scenario number 7 is that we keep it the same, but was there a thought, and I can go back and listen to the recording, but.
Well, there was some discussion about, what about doing every other year thing?
Okay.
But again,
But not for next.
I don't think
No.
there's
Okay.
any rush on that. Let's just have it on our agenda, and we can continue to talk about it, but there's no need for any rush decision on this.
Perfect.
Okay.
And if I may, I know we're getting close over time here, but we have a new website we've talked about, the new scheduling system, and there have been improvements already noted with the scheduling. The ease, and what I mean by that is administratively the ease. And Renee, I don't know if you want to just briefly touch on that, but it is a great thing and one of those huzzah things.
Just in connecting with Gianna just last week, it took him 1 hour this year to do what used to take him a full 10-hour day. Like, let me rephrase that. It took him 1 hour for 3 areas in Taylorsville. It used to take him a 10-hour day for just 1 hour, or one area.
You're good.
Yeah.
You're
My
good.
brain is like, so essentially, it's cut down the administrative time tremendously. And we've also gotten some early feedback from residents. Well, they're upset because it gets filled up really fast. But I mean, our front of office has been a lot quieter than it was last year. And so and we're also able to see just outside of the program, our inbound calls and our chats are going down because folks are self-serving and we're seeing tickets go up. So they're self-serving on the website. So we have some really great data to show.
maybe for next month, show us
The data.
the website, or you
Oh,
show us
yeah.
why it's easier, or something like that.
Okay.
Because to me, part of the question is what Cindy initially asked, what is the purpose of the scrap program?
Yep.
So if that can start to help answer some of the questions and start to ease it, say, here's the process that they can go through. I mean, I don't.
Perfect.
I signed up for a thing, but.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You do?
Have you a little narrative. Cool,
Thank you so much. Thanks, Renee, for all you do. Katarina, thanks for everything you do as well.
Yeah.
As always. All right, I'll entertain a motion then to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion, a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Facilitation there. Especially with the ever.
I'd love to chat.
Right.